Two clients that sold a house this week that our team worked with brought money to the closing table to close the sale. This is Ron Wojciechowski for the Black Hole of Real Estate, and you heard that right. You see, most people expect that when they sell a home, they're going to get some money back at the closing table. Now, in this case, it didn't happen, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. If you can imagine that you bought a home in the last 2 or 3 years, and the property value stayed relatively the same, and you had a small down payment, no down payment, FHA, VA, that would get you in a situation where the figures might be a little tight after if you had an agent, paid some commissions, some closing costs, things like that. Or if you also got some help. The seller paid your closing costs, and maybe they gave you a few thousand or 2 or 3%, sometimes 5-6%. There's a lot of money changing hands at the closing table. So if I could paint a picture for you that you did a $300,000 purchase 2 years ago, and let's suppose that between commissions and fees, you got 20 grand, something like that, maybe. But then you also had baked into the cake that $300,000 purchase had 3% help, cash back at closing to pay your closing costs then. That 300 looked a lot more like 291 as the sales price back then. So I hope you're tracking with that. $300,000 purchase price, but 291 is the net after the 9,000. So with that in mind, let's suppose, and fast forward to now, the home was worth about 291, and you had 20,000 in closing costs. So now you're down to like 270, something like that is what it's going to take to close this deal out, because you've got to pay off the mortgage too. And that's a lot of numbers thrown at you really fast. So a different way of breaking it down. Let's say it sells for 300 right now, and you have to pay to get it closed. And maybe it doesn't sell right at 300. Maybe it sells at 295. And let's minus out 20 grand really fast. 275 is probably what you would do at the closing table, give or take. Now, what if when you bought it, you paid 300,000 for it and you did 5% down? So that's 15 grand. So now 285 loan size, right? But you're only getting back 275 at closing. Now you, congratulations, may have to bring $10,000 to the closing table. And I say that, a bit facetiously, but we need to look at this in the beginning before we ever put the house on the market. We have to know the numbers in such a way that can we actually sell this house and then bring money to the table? Because if we knew, now what we knew, then, we might hesitate to do that. And there's a couple of outcomes that we can predict if we know that. Is there a buyer right at $300,000 to maybe get you to where you can break even at closing? It's possible. But you also know negotiations, if the offers are 260 or 270, you've got to hold super firm, or you're going to not be able to close it, or have to go borrow some money or put some money into it from a savings account, borrow from a 401k. Not everyone wants to do that. Now let's flip it around. Why would somebody actually want to do that? Maybe they've moved away and they don't want to be a landlord, and there's no way that they can move either with a job transfer, change of life, getting married, getting divorced. Sometimes you just have to make a business decision that the mortgage payment is $2 grand a month and you got to bring $5 grand to the table. Well, maybe, just maybe, rather than making a couple extra payments and having taxes and insurance rolling up and maybe utilities rolling up, the house sitting empty, it's hurricane season, maybe it's the lesser of a couple of bad things to just sell it, bring some money to the table, and make it go away. Now, I would also tell you that in the flipping game, this is problematic. We work in the affordable housing sector, a company of mine, and we'll purchase homes, we will renovate them, rent them out, and then maybe refinance them down the road and then clean that money back out and do it again. So we don't necessarily have to have a margin for flipping, but let's just say that you needed a margin to flip it. Now, what if you bought it at 125, you put 50 into it, so you got 175 absolutely into it. Maybe you had to pay some insurance up front. You've had some carrying costs, some interest along the way. And maybe the best that you can do is sell it at 185 instead of the 225 you think it's going to be. Now you're sold at 185. You probably have some closing costs and fees unless you sell it on your own. But the margins are super skinny. And we see it all the time where we go in and we make an offer on a property and we know what our scope of work looks like, and we know it's going to be a $70,000 renovation, there's literally no money sometimes in it. If you're in it at 195, for us, we just have to be able to rent it out. Now, the 1% rule tells us if you get 195 into it, 1% is 1950. Is that possible? And if it isn't, then you've got to really think about it. On the other side of this, if you're trying to flip it and you got 195 into it and the best you do to market is 185, then you as a flipper, you got some tough decisions. Either you're going to rent it out and maybe get $1,700-1,800 for it and call it a day, but now you don't have the cash to do the next flip. Or you've got to go into your funds and actually bring some money to the table to get rid of the house that you tried to flip that you actually lost money on instead of made money on, to do it all over again. So you see there's some complication in this market. In a balanced market where prices are not necessarily ascending quickly in certain areas, being super careful about the home that you're either buying today, maybe you bought a few years ago and are trying to sell today, or if you're trying to flip it and make a few bucks, maybe start with the end in mind. So tightening up the sales comparables is important. But the other side of it is we don't know where the market's heading in the next 3 to 6 months. It could be the same, it could be higher, it could be lower. My crystal ball says it's probably a little bit higher, but we could be wrong about that. And is this the type of investment that you want to make with your hard-earned money, especially when you can put 3 to 6 months worth of work in it just to lose money? That's rough. So take this message for what it is. 2 people this week brought money to the table to sell a home. If you got questions on how to do this or maybe how to avoid this, drop us a line below. Definitely hit the subscribe button. Give us a like. Give us a 5-star rating. We love those. And we look forward to catching you on the next episode. This is Ron Wojciechowski for the Black Hole of Real Estate.